Okay, I think I have my PPT on the screen. That should be all right. Yeah, I'm also trying to see if I can get my video along with that. It's a little easier. Okay, great. I think I'm good to go. Shall I start?
Dr. Sundar, please put your PPT on full
I'm
screen.
doing that. I'm just doing that.
Yeah.
I was just trying to get to see if I can move my video up. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sonali, for this arranging this wonderful series of webinars. Uh, I think we started working with COVID as a department in August, and then I fully recognize the role our nurses have played in this. So, and then we've also been working with the post-COVID care since September 7th. So we fully recognize the role what we have as a team to play. I've kept this presentation very simple. I've spoken to Ms. Ramya to understand the audience. I've sort of put out a few objectives, so I'll go through with that. We've already have gone through a couple of more presentations earlier. Did participate in the session which Dr. Akshay spoke. I think he's one of our team members who's done phenomenally well within the post-COVID care team that we have. So some of the information what I put out may be repetitive, but I put it on purpose just to highlight some of the factors. But before I begin this presentation, I think I completely owe all the experience that we have as a post-COVID team and the services what we have provided. I completely owe our experience to this gentleman, Dr. Naresh Shetty. I think I've always seen him as a mentor who's been ahead of his time in his thinking. When we started the uh, acute COVID care in our center in June, I very clearly remember attending meetings with him, and then when we started admitting patients, within a month, even before we could discharge our first patients who got admitted into the hospital, he started speaking about the need for caring of patients after patients gets discharged from our hospitals. So the seed for the post-COVID care, what we have put together, completely belongs to him. He's nurtured the idea, and then he probably is built up one of the biggest post-COVID care clinics. I don't have statistics to make claims, but the numbers what we have seen since September 7th speaks for itself. I think we have been one of the largest providers of a structured post-COVID care clinic. And his vision, Dr. Akshay also would have highlighted that the model what we have developed with guidance of Dr. Naresh Shetty is a multidisciplinary team of physicians, pulmonologists, cardiologists, neurologists, psychiatrists, pediatricians, physiotherapists, rehab team, and nutritionists. And why did we come together? Because COVID presented with a multitude of problems. Dr. Akshay beautifully highlighted system-wise presentations. I think when I looked at his presentation, he highlighted what happens in the lungs, what happens in the heart, what happens in the brain, what happens in the blood vessels. He went through the systems. And what he spoke was not purely based on literature. He also spoke based on the patients whom we have treated. Right? So the vision what Naresh Shetty had put together actually helped us to conceive a team that was actually designed to serve a huge set of population whom we came across. And the outcome of that was this beautiful post-COVID care pathway that we had actually created. When we created this particular pathway, we looked at literature across the globe, and we can say with conviction, the kind of a pathway that we have created was unique at that time. The model what we have developed, the way we have integrated, if you actually see, we have very clearly defined timelines based on evidence. So when a person gets discharged from a hospital, we anticipate them to have certain set of challenges, which the patient is advised at the time of discharge within our hospital. So they're required to come back to the post-COVID clinic at 14 days post-discharge or 21 days post first symptoms. Currently, that's been revised to 17 days based on available evidence. So they get screened by the physician, the primary physician, which is led by Dr. Vijayshri, Dr. Taranath, and Dr. Akshay. So they evaluate, and then based on their evaluation, they refer them to multitude of other specialists, including pulmonologists, cardiologists, neurologists, psychiatrists, dietary review, and of course for other investigations. And then if they think if the person is safe, they get referred for rehab. The physiotherapist takes over. We have a set of assessments to do, a comprehensive assessments to do. And if the physician is referred for other super specialty referrals, they evaluate, conduct investigations. And then if you look at the graph, if you look at the flow chart, it sort of comes down to an evaluation of physiotherapy and rehab. Okay, so either from the physician directly or from a super specialist after their investigations, they come down for fitness to undergo endurance testing. So that sort of highlights the role PTs could actually play in post-COVID care. So this pathway, what we had put together, was delivered by a comprehensive team put together by Dr. Naresh Shetty. Dr. Akshay highlighted the team members, naming each of them. What I want you to notice also the nurse who is there prominently, such a very cheerful, vibrant, energetic. During the second wave, when the numbers started going, she single-handedly handled so many patients, coordinating between registrations to doctor consultations to referrals for rehab. I think without her, I do not see us delivering the work what we actually delivered on that case. So this is the background for the post-COVID clinic, what we had put together, what we have. Coming to today's talk, I have looked at my focus on these 2 points. An overview of post-COVID presentations. Dr. Akshay highlighted them in great detail. I'm just going to touch upon a few for a few reasons. I will speak about that in the next couple of minutes. Then role of exercise in post-COVID phase. I'm looking at a few questions to answer the larger role of exercise in post-COVID phase. Is there a need? Is it beneficial? What type of exercise? Is it safe? And what precautions should be observed? So it's going to be a point by point explanation to the questions what I have put for myself. And at any point in time, if you have any clarifications, if you think you have any views to share, experience to share, you're most welcome. I recognize based on my conversation with Ms. Ramya that a large proportion of participants would be nursing students and practicing nurses. And I also given to understand that some of them have actually gone through their experience on their own. More than the literature, more than our experiences, I would welcome you to share your experiences of what you have gone through. And you could relate with the role rehabilitation could play in recovery to regular functions. Okay. I think I'll just move this up. Dr. Akshay actually beautifully explained in a graphical manner what all happens. Here, I just wanted to pick upon 2 systems that often gets overlooked, and then I wanted to come back to that. Okay? Lungs, of course, everyone recognizes COVID with lungs. Everyone knows that the patients experience breathing difficulties. Oxygen has been a major point of concern for many of our patients, both within our centers and outside. Cardiac involvement we recognize during the phase, brain fog, hypertension, and all that gets prominence. One system that probably doesn't get spoken about, one that gets missed out, is your muscles. The reason I place a lot of emphasis on muscles is that it itself acts like an organ. You may have breathing difficulty, you may experience cardiac systems, but the final outcome of all the system involvement, the presentation, somehow relates to the muscles, simply because your muscles are the only organ in your body that can actually actively spend energy. And they are the organs that actually help you move. Movement becomes very critical for us as humans for anything and everything we do. Even when I'm speaking now, I'm actually sitting up and speaking. I'm holding my head high. I'm not sure how many of you have actually seen patients go through challenges. When we have seen patients in an acute phase, we have seen patients struggling to sit. The reason they struggle, of course, there's a lung involvement, there's a cardiac involvement. The reason they struggle to sit is that when they sit, their body needs a set of muscles to act. When those muscles act, they need energy. So when I'm sitting up in a chair support, my trunk muscles, my abdomen, all needs to be supported. And that support needs a set of muscle work that needs energy. In addition to that, I'm sitting upright. My body has to pump blood slightly against gravity compared to when I'm lying down. So that also increases the strain. So in order to take care of our day-to-day routine, our heart and our lungs need to work in a slightly different manner compared to what it happens while we are lying down, right? So you see the link between how the need for doing an activity is challenging our heart and lungs. Does it mean that if my heart and lungs is cured, will I be normal? Does it mean that I'm recovered from COVID, my lungs have reasonably become fine, my heart has reasonably become fine? So does that mean I can get back to my routine immediately? In the next few slides, we will look at answers to those questions. So in addition to all the systems, what you have read about, what you've heard about, what you've seen in news channels, also remember muscles are an organ. I'm not saying muscle is a tissue. I'm saying muscle is an organ that actually gets significantly affected in people who undergo any kind of critical illness. It happens more so in COVID simply because you all might have heard about spike proteins as one of the primary uh, factors involved in COVID spread in terms of infection within our body, in terms of antibody production. But muscles have a major role to play in working towards these spike proteins, and muscles get damaged significantly. The slide, what I've put it over there, is actually indicating the muscle damage that happens in people with COVID. And when muscles are damaged, it affects our movement. When our movements is affected, our ability to return back to a routine work is compromised. The other system that often gets overlooked is our joints. The dengue has actually highlighted that post-viral infection, it's common for people to get joint pains. Many people have gone through significant reactive arthritis following viral infections, and COVID is no exception towards that. We have seen some of our staff go through terrible pain following the COVID infection, be it their back, be it their knees, be it their shoulders and elbows. So that's also a problem that often gets overlooked. So in addition to post-COVID presentations of what you've commonly come across, I'd also request the audience to remember that beyond your heart and lungs and your brain and your blood vessels, your muscles and joints are also getting significantly affected in COVID. Their affection is actually going to be impactful on your day-to-day routine. And in this context, the next question, what I'm putting forward to you, is there a need for exercise? Okay. So when I say, is there a need for exercise? Oh, I think I missed. Yeah. Is there a need for exercise or rehabilitation? I'll share our experiences. Okay. As part of a post-COVID clinic, we have a comprehensive assessment pro forma. As we saw in the pathway, the physicians evaluate the patients. Then they come back to the physio team for evaluation. We, as part of our assessment, we look at pain, we look at fatigue, we look at balance impairment, we look at muscle strength by various metrics of upper body strength and lower body strength. We look at activity independence in activities of daily living. And the next important thing, we look at cardiopulmonary endurance. Okay. Few of our important findings says more than 60% of people whom we evaluated, irrespective, note this point, irrespective of them having either a severe COVID illness or a mild illness, invariably tended to have muscle weakness. We did grip strength as one pointer for muscle strength, and we also did a test called as a 30-second sit to stand. And when we look at 30-second sit to stand, it's a very simple test. You get a person to sit in a chair, get them to sit up and stand for 30 seconds. An average adult should be doing over about 16 to 18 times. Hardly 10% of our people would have actually met that criteria. We had toned down our criteria because they were recovering from an illness, and then we were looking at evaluating them 21 days post COVID. So we had toned down our criteria to 12 to 14 repetitions based on male and female. And this cutoff of 12 to 14 repetitions is actually for senior citizens who are 60 years and above. So we toned down our criteria to that of senior citizens, applied that for people who are in middle aged, and in that, more than 60% of our people had strength deficits. And this strength deficits had implications for their day-to-day routine. When I say it had implications for their day-to-day routine, I would like you to remember the idea of normal. Okay? In your normal routine, the common truth at this current point in time is that we, as part of a daily routine, though we work for long hours, we work at home, we come back over here, and then we do significant amount of work, and then we work for long hours, and then we go back home and then we work. But the point to note over there is the work what we do as part of a daily routine is something called as a light intensity activity. The reason I'm saying it is a light intensity activity is the normal physical exertion that we do as part of a daily routine. We categorize them into 4 categories. One is sedentary work, means the work that requires us to sit and do. Okay, I'm sitting and delivering a lecture. I'm consuming energy that's slightly more than my resting level. If I were to give one as a value to my resting energy expenditure, when I'm sitting and working, I'm spending an energy of about 1.5. I'm not saying 1.5 times, I'm saying 1.5 units of my resting energy expenditure. And invariably, being in academia, being in administration, a lot of our work is in sitting. It is mentally strenuous, it is tiring, but in terms of energy requirements, it is not even light intensity, it is actually sedentary behavior. If I go a step further, the activities that needs me to stand and move around a little bit in a low pace. So if you look at a nurse working in a ward, okay, or you cooking at home, or you taking care of the children at home, they all would come under the category of light intensity activity. What that means is I'm spending slightly more energy, but that energy is not challenging my reserves because it only needs between 1 to 3 times of my resting energy expenditure. And this kind of activities are called as light intensity activities. Though we feel exhausted at the end of the day, but the truth is, in terms of energy requirement, they don't need much energy in terms of kilocalories per se. Though we say we need a lot of mental energy, we need a lot of mental strength, but in terms of true energy consumptions, when you're working in a ward, you're standing all the time. It does cause you back pain, it does tire you out. Or when you're sitting in a class, you're doing a lab experiment, you're learning in a practical lab, majority of the time, they're all light intensity activities. If you go back to the next level of moderate intensity, an activity that is similar to walking in intensity is moderate. It is good, it consumes energy, but the truth is we spend hardly about half an hour or so in our daily routine, or maybe less than that, doing an activity that is moderate intensity in nature. Please remember, when you're working in your ward, if as a student, I've seen a lot of nursing students in a ward, or if you look at nurses working in a ward, it is tiring without a doubt. It is exhausting without a doubt. But in terms of energy expenditure, it does not need much of an energy expenditure because it's a low intensity activity. Now, when you recover from COVID, you go back to a routine that essentially does not need much of an energy. You don't realize the impact what it has created for you. What you will think is that I'm feeling fatigued, I'm feeling tired, but I sleep, I become better. Instead of working for 8 hours, I probably work for 4 hours, I'm okay with that. So you think the problem is with only tiredness and fatigue. You do not realize that your capacities are compromised. You do not realize that your reserves are compromised. You will realize that your reserves are compromised when you climb 4 floors of stairs. If you were to compare yourself prior to COVID, and then if you were climbing stairs, it would have been mildly challenging. You may feel slightly breathless. But when after COVID, if you try to climb stairs, maybe even 2 months after COVID, maybe 3 months after COVID, when you climb 2 flights of stairs or maybe 2 floors, you realize what has happened to your body. In our testing, we try and do that. We try and go into your reserve to see is your reserve compromised. So when you ask me, is there a need for rehab? The overwhelming, what do you call, like, unanimous answer to that is that there is a need for rehab, simply because you don't even realize that you're actually functioning within your reserves, not at your normal capacity following COVID. So if you wanted to recover back, we need to go through a series of programs that helps us to recover our functioning. It helps us to recover our capacities. Okay, please, if you wanted to take home one message from this entire presentation is this: our normal work is generally light intensity or maybe moderate intensity in terms of physical exertion. Following COVID, when you get back to that routine, you don't realize you're compromised. If I were to do an exercise testing, which we have done on people, my colleague Veena and team, we put people on post-COVID rehab, then we realize on a bicycle ergometer, somebody who's supposed to be working at 50, 60 watts is struggling at 20 watts. Somebody who's supposed to do 6-minute walk distance of 500 plus meters is struggling to do 300 meters or maybe 400 meters. It simply says that you're actually functioning into your reserve without realizing how much you've actually lost in your capacity. So the majority of the population whom you speak or you see, they all will say that they've recovered from COVID and they're normal. That's because they're not challenged themselves. They got back into a routine which looks normal, but when they are faced with a situation that requires them to exert a little more, which, for example, if you're going for shopping, you may need to walking with weights and all that. Prior to COVID, the person might have done it easily. Following COVID, when they tend to start doing that, they realize they're compromised. And in current times, people are not experiencing that, so they think they're normal. The truth is, we probably are not recovering. So there's a strong need for rehabilitation interventions. Many organizations have come out with some simple philosophies for rehab. The biggest advantage and the biggest benefit is that rehab is a very simple, comfortable intervention. It does not need great amount of expertise to put it into practice, but it needs to be delivered under supervision and code. This, what I'm going to highlight with you is from Johns Hopkins, which has given a very simplified strategy, very easy to follow. I'm going to highlight on that. I'm going to highlight why we need to do that also to you. Okay. As I said in the previous assessments when we are doing it, we say we assess pain, we assess strength, we assess endurance, lungs are affected and all that. So when we look at exercise, the role of exercise, a single unified goal of exercise is to help you return back to normal functional capacity. I use this word functional capacity with a great sense of responsibility. The role of exercise is to ensure that you return back to your level of good health so that you can carry out all your activities the way you would have been doing comfortably and within your resource. Okay. So for that, we need to ensure that we improve our respiratory system, we activate our balance system, we activate our mobility, we improve strength, we improve endurance. So these are the 5 components of exercise that we need to take home as. I'm repeating what I said. We need to improve our respiratory system. That is, I'll highlight in the next steps, how do we go about doing that? We activate our vestibular system. There's a strong need for that. I will highlight that. We need to improve mobility. We need to build strength. We need to build endurance. Okay. In the next couple of slides, I will highlight why we do that. How do we do that? I had a request to demonstrate exercise. I do recognize that demonstration would be catchy, it would be useful, but I'm not sure how much it will add value as a take-home message, simply because when I look at a buffet of exercise, I use the word buffet of exercise there, you have so many choices to even within breathing exercise, though the philosophy remains very simple, the choices within breathing exercise, I probably will use the terms like diaphragmatic breathing, thoracic expansion, apical breathing, or segmental breathing, and all that. And then if you combine yoga, you had a session on Ayurveda, I'm sure they highlighted the relevance of yogic patterns into that or other techniques, traditional things. The variety is so humongous. It will do injustice to demonstrate 1 or 2 exercises and say these are the exercises, please go ahead and then do that. Instead, I believe if we give you a philosophy of why exercise is needed and what are the guiding principles of those exercises, my belief is that it will give you some clarity of why it is needed. And with your role as nurses, you would be able to refer them, you will be able to identify who needs support and then refer to the concerned people who will evaluate and then put them on a program. I will highlight those points when I speak about the precautions to be followed. Okay. Okay. Now, when I come to breathing exercise, the reason for breathing exercises, there are 3 things that happens. Okay. Of course, there are too many changes that's happening, but I will focus on 3 important components. Fine. And our focus of breathing exercise works on those 3 components. Okay. The reason we tend to do that is, the reason I'm highlighting these 3 is, there are so many varieties of breathing exercises. We as PTs, what we do is, when we see a person, we evaluate, then we identify what are the gaps. Why is that person experiencing a challenge? Is it a problem of pattern? Is it a problem of strength? Is it a problem of capacity? These are the 3 focuses we have: pattern, strength, capacity. I'll highlight each of those points with that. Okay. When you have a COVID infection in your lungs, we all have heard about pulmonary fibrosis. And then if somebody is within an ICU, what is happening is he's on steroids, he's on many medications, he's on bed rest for a period of time. Thankfully, in our environment, people are not on bed rest because we have a team of physios. We have a team of 3 to 4 physios that goes into the wards every day. And then we mobilize patients every day. So our patients don't experience that kind of a problem. But in most situations, when patients are actually on bed rest, the muscles undergo deconditioning like crazy. Our body's conditioning reduces significantly. Our lungs capacity reduces significantly. And our respiratory muscle strength, that includes our intercostal muscles, our diaphragm, our accessory muscles of scalenes, sternomastoid, they all undergo wasting. They all undergo significant wasting. When a person is on an IV, when a person is on ventilator, his respiratory system is compromised beyond imagination. Okay. So in this situation, and then his breathing pattern is altered because he's trying to struggle to breathe, he will use all his accessory muscles to breathe. So in that context, he is going to be doing breathing because the goal is to get as much as oxygen as possible. In that effort, you spend crazy amounts of energy to just breathe. Normally, we don't even realize that we're breathing. I'm not even conscious I'm breathing when I'm talking or doing an activity. But there, a person is fully conscious, and his only goal when he's lying down in the bed is that he has to get in sufficient air. Now, when he recovers from that and comes, he retains that breathing pattern. And with that breathing pattern, what is happening is he's retaining a breathing pattern that is high on energy consumption. You remember our respiratory muscles actually doing a lot of work. It has to move a thoracic cage, expand and compress my thoracic cage on a regular basis. We normally breathe about 12 to 14 times in a minute. A person following COVID, our average respiratory rate is 24. So imagine the amount of work that the individual is doing just because of breathing. So our goal is to correct the breathing pattern. We do that by a range of exercises, including relaxed breathing exercise. The next goal is to improve strength. Because the respiratory muscles have lost strength, we have techniques where we help the muscles to regain strength. This is a very tricky issue because for us to strengthen a muscle, the general philosophy is we have to overload the muscle. Now, this muscle is working 24 hours a day, 365 days a time. And then when it's overloading a muscle, this muscle will get fatigued. And when this muscle gets fatigued, what is going to happen? I'm going to struggle to breathe. When I'm going to struggle to breathe, I start using accessory muscles. When I start using accessory muscles, what happens? My energy expenditure starts increasing. Then what happens? I start getting tired very fast. When I start getting tired very fast, my work capacity reduces. See how it sort of works in a cyclic fashion. So when we do respiratory muscle training, we have to be careful not to overload the respiratory muscles. The reason I'm not looking at demonstrating a technique is these are skilled events which people learn following rigorous training. The philosophy is easy to capture, but for a patient, it becomes individualistic and not a good idea to prescribe exercise without a clinical evaluation. A general overview, a general plan is excellent and everybody must know. That's important. But when it comes to prescription, I think it is always good to have a clinical evaluation done before prescribing exercises. The third component, what I said, was capacity. When I say capacity, because of fibrosis, because of reduced muscle strength, because of stiffness in the thoracic cage, our ability to exchange gases with our environment reduces. Our total lung capacity reduces. Our vital capacity reduces. Our inspiratory reserve capacity reduces. So we have to put them in an exercise program that involves large muscles and helps the lungs to breathe in, exchange air, lungs to expand and slowly improve its reserves. And we got to be very careful when we do this because when we tend to do deep breathing exercises, if you overdo it, a lung is already scarred. And into that scarred lung, we overstretch it, we damage the lung alveoli, we damage the lung parenchyma. In fact, spirometry, the incentive spirometry is generally contraindicated in acute COVID situations because the goal of an incentive spirometry, you might have seen that in the wards, is the goal is that you suck in air fast as you can. When I do that, I'm actually pushing in air at a very rapid pace into the lungs. So I'm stretching my lungs suddenly. When I'm doing that, what's likely to happen? I'm stretching my lung alveoli. And that alveoli, the parenchyma, is inflamed. It's overstressed. It's leaky. So I'm likely to damage that. So when I'm working on lung expansion, I need to be very gentle. I need to do it in such a manner that I do not damage the lung tissues. Right? So that's the goal, what we work with while doing breathing exercises. When I say vestibular, a person is lying down for a long period of time or sitting up, his sense of balance gets lost. So the risk of fall in an individual following prolonged bed rest for any condition is increased. In COVID, it's no different. So we look at activating the vestibular system before we encourage mobility into the individual. So we focus on that. Okay? These are very simple exercises that involves actually trying to turn on sides very basically. This activates the inner ear canals and then triggers them to be proactive so that during any change in position, they react to that and then activate our brain towards it. We look at some eye movements, we look at head movements, and then we integrate with the third step of the cross body movement. And it's a cross body movement. Though our body is symmetrical, we have two pairs of hands, two pairs of legs, two pairs of lungs, kidneys, they're symmetrically placed. But remember, our brains are actually crossed because our body is tuned to work in a crossed manner. In physiotherapy, we use something called as a proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation that purely works on crossing philosophy. Our movement are crossed movements. And when we do that, we activate our nervous system. We activate our reactions to movement. So this becomes essential to prime our muscles, to prime our nervous system to be ready for any movement. And then they work better in that sense. So this essentially will involve turning around, trying to touch the opposite knees, trying to touch your back, trying to move on this side. So it's like crossing your movement. You take your right side towards the left, you take your left towards the right. So that is the philosophy of crossing movement. The next two are important: strength training and endurance training. There is a strength training I highlighted in the beginning that our muscles undergo significant weakness. So we'll have to look at increasing the strength of the muscles. The muscles literally undergo damage. One of our students is actually doing strength testing in muscles using some advanced machines. Since we were looking at healthcare workers, not even lay people, healthcare workers are generally fitter within the physiotherapy department. And who have had COVID, they show such weakness in their muscles. And this is within 4 weeks or 6 weeks of post-COVID recovery. And people with mild or asymptomatic disease, they had significant, we actually compared for the pilot, they looked at strength testing for people who had COVID, and then we're looking at strength testing for people who did not have COVID, but they are matched for their age and gender and other characteristics. So people with COVID had significant deficits in strength. So we put them on a strength training program. Again, we follow the same principles of low load, slow increase in strength training. The philosophy of strength training is we do training as a large muscles. The philosophy is strength training should be done twice a week, 2 to 3 times a week. So if I'm working on my biceps, if I'm loading my biceps or upper body muscles, I should not do it 5 days a week. I probably will be doing 2 to 3 days a week, provided I am doing it at a sufficient intensity. If my intensity is lower, I look at it doing an endurance training, then I do it a little more frequently. Okay, we combine the strength training with endurance training. When I say endurance training, I mean cardiorespiratory endurance or aerobic training. This is the simplest of exercise, and you are the best guide for this. The simplest of aerobic exercise is walking. We all do that as part of a daily routine. Just that in COVID, we need to be careful about the intensity at which we walk. The recommendation is to walk at light intensity, slowly progress to moderate intensity, and then increase to higher intensities. And then when we progress to higher intensities, we need to be careful because I'll highlight the importance of precautions in the next 2 slides. But the goal is to improve the amount of, when I say amount of walking, I say the intensity at which we walk, the pace at which I walk, that has to slightly increase. On a very general ballpark figure, a speed between 4 to 6 kilometers per hour is a good speed to look at. 4 when you're starting to walk in a very gentle stroll, maybe 3.5 if you're very sick, for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then slowly increase to about 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and then start increasing the speed so that you reach a speed of 6 kilometers per hour for about 30 minutes in a day. If you reach that level, it indicates that you're functioning at a reasonable capacity. The goal over here is to slowly progress and then take it forward on that. Okay. There are many other ways of doing aerobic exercise. You could do it on treadmill, you could do it on bicycle ergometer, you could combine that with yoga, you could do it with dance. So the scope for doing aerobic exercise is no limit. Any activity that uses large muscles in a rhythmic manner is considered as aerobic exercise. So you can choose what you like, you can advise what you like, but safety becomes important. We should do it within the bounds of safety limits. The reason why we need to do that, we all have realized that COVID virus doesn't really affect people directly. It doesn't kill people too much. It is the reactions, it is the inflammatory responses that affects each and every organ is dangerous. Okay. So when you're exercising following COVID, please remember exercise has significant impact on immune system. A high intensity exercise done immediately will need a different kind of a response from your body, and that can be fatal. I'm saying that can be fatal with a lot of responsibility, because when somebody is exercising, the general responses are blood pressure has to go up as a correct response to exercise. But in COVID, there's a lot of dyssynchrony between sympathetic and parasympathetic system, because of which the regulation of a blood pressure is compromised. So it is a possibility that you may experience accelerated hypertension. And many people have been diagnosed, newly diagnosed, to have hypertension or diabetes following COVID. It affects you for various other reasons. So in such scenario, if you exercise without thinking, if you being over enthusiastic in exercising, it can be fatal. And there have been reports of people getting too quickly into exercise, into higher intensity, and that has turned out fatal. People have had stroke, people have had cardiac arrest, people have actually died following an exercise. So is it safe? It is absolutely safe, provided you follow the basic principles of safety, basic principles of monitoring. The reason we need to do that is myocarditis is something we've heard about a lot. So the markers, what we need to look at it is, if somebody is overtly fatigued, if somebody is overtly fatigued, what it basically tells you is that that individual is likely to have high levels of inflammatory processes going on in your body. It may not show up in your D dimers, it may not show up in your regular CRP levels, but if you evaluate at much micro level inflammatory responses, it is likely that there is a subclinical inflammation happening in your body, and there's an extremely strong relationship between inflammation and fatigue. So if somebody is excessively fatigued, somebody has high respiratory rate, somebody has high resting heart rate, somebody has high resting BP, somebody has high blood sugars, 5 pointers. I'm repeating: excessive fatigue, excessive respiratory rate, excessive or rather higher resting heart rate, okay, high BP, high sugars. If these are the experiences, the simple philosophy is go slow. You look at it slowing slow and listen to the body, reduce the intensity, increase the frequency, and then allow the person to exercise. Do it in that context. Okay, it's critical, it is essential that we take precautions seriously. We follow these precautions and then we exercise people. And then coming on to the role of nurses, I think I've done my COVID duty myself 6 times. I was having an important role to put together our post-COVID clinic. This is the way I see the nurses role. They spend the maximum number of hours with patients in the ward, and they spend a good amount of time interacting with patients. So they are likely to be the first set of healthcare professionals to pick out problems with patients. And because of their inherent nature, inherent philosophy, inherent compassion, care, what they provide, they're excellent at educating people. My sister myself was COVID positive at a particular point in time, and I can very well relate the role nurses played in helping her cope with the challenge what she was going through. This is a personal experience what I am sharing, right? In terms of helping her understand what she's going through, in terms of highlighting about the medications and overall care. And the reason why we agreed to do this talk for you, in addition to the overwhelming job that you're doing, if you can also sensitize the patients whom you interact with about the importance and role of exercise in facilitating recovery, I think that will be wonderful. And I'm sure you would do a wonderful job in that also. Thank you. I can stop screen share.
You're planning to show us some video?
No, ma'am.
Sir,
I'll be happy to what do you call, explain. I say explain, like if I just demonstrate an exercise, I'm not sure how much it'll cause more confusion. What we've generally observed is that when they see one exercise or two exercises, that stays well in their mind, and then they think that is what that needs to be done. But the challenge is it depends from individual to individual, and then the requirement varies a lot. So I generally refrain from saying this is the exercise to do.
Sir, I have a question for you.
Please.
Sir, like, for example, if a patient is coming to an OPD,
Yeah.
and they are asking nurses, like, what are the exercises that they can, simple exercises that they can perform at home. So
Yeah.
what would you advise them, sir? What are the simple exercises that we can perform?
I would ideally say refer to a physio, because that would be the right thing to do. But in general conversation, the most important thing to look at is safety first. So when you are advising patients to do an exercise from your side, you will look at basic things to do that can be done safely. Breathing exercises are very simple, easy to do. Okay. When you say breathing exercise, the goal is this: you sit quiet, you become conscious of your breathing, you slowly inhale, slowly exhale. We see that in our yoga videos throughout. As a culture, we're all familiar with. When we as PTs advise it, we look at it slightly differently in terms of the muscles that we recruit for various reasons. But if you were to tell a patient to exercise, tell them that they can do breathing exercise. When they're doing breathing exercise, the focus should be they should not breathe in too fast. The neck muscle, that should not happen. They should be very calm, sit quiet, and slowly breathe in, slowly breathe out. This will do no harm. That's something you are safe to teach. It will have no implications. It will be beneficial. So that's something you please go ahead and you can tell the patients about in case somebody asks you. If there's no physio for you to refer to, that's something that can be easily communicated to. Okay. The next thing, what you need to do is basic flexibility exercise. There's a flexibility exercise. This will be in terms of stretching out our muscles. Okay. The stretching out of muscle, the simplest of stretches, like about 3 stretches if people do, that will be quite easy to do. You have to stand in the corner of a wall, play, like if you see this corner over here, you put your hands on both sides of the corner of the wall, go a little bit front, you open up your chest wall, you stretch your lungs, you stretch your arms, you do that. That's beneficial. One. Number 2, you take your arms this side, bend, so you again stretch your trunk. You do that. The third, keep your arms crossed, turn the other side. So you twist your trunk. Very simple, basic flexibility exercises to do. And this will help the person to be, you remember I put one slide on crossing your body. So this is part of that crossing your body. You look at. These 3 are very safe. Just that you will be aware of joint pain, because somebody's got shoulder pain, you ask them to elevate and stretch, it can be dangerous. So it can aggravate the pain. So you will be sensitive to those challenges what people experience. Okay. So that is number 2. Number 3 is the strength training. The simplest of strength training is sitting in a chair and standing. Like when a person is sitting in a chair, you ask them to do a simple standing that actually activates a whole lot of muscles. It will look like as a very basic exercise, but it strengthens your hips, it strengthens your quads, it strengthens your calf muscles, it strengthens the spine. And that's a very simple exercise, easy to monitor to do. So that can be told about. The next exercise is about walking, can be advised. When you ask people to walk, please remember to ask them to monitor their heart rate. Okay, when people are walking, there's a basic philosophy. If they're walking without supervision, without awareness of their health things, they should not walk at a speed that elicits your heart rate that is 60 to 65% of your maximal heart rate. They should not walk at that if they're walking without supervision. So the safest advice is to walk in a very slow, comfortable pace. We use a scale called as a rating of perceived exertion. That's like scale of 0 means they're resting on bed without doing anything. 10 means they've done the maximally exertional activity like climbing a mountain or running fast. That's a scale of 10. So the safest limit for them to walk is within a rating of perceived exertion 1 to 2 to begin with, and then slowly go to 3. Unsupervised exercise should all invariably be light to begin with, and then slowly can be progressed to mild or moderate intensity.
So there is another question.
Yeah.
Is there any specific exercise for those patients who were on invasive ventilator care and then recovered from that?
Remember the 5 exercises what I put will all apply, but people who have been on invasive ventilator will have significant muscle wasting. They'll have extremely high amounts of your intercostal muscle wasting will be there. For them, we put them through a program of inspiratory and expiratory muscle training. The simple philosophy of that is you breathe in through resistance. Okay, at a very simplistic level, the easiest way to do that is take a straw, okay, a plastic straw, ensure that the straw is clean. Maybe take a thicker straw, sanitize it, okay, hold the straw, press it slightly, and then breathe in through that. When you're breathing in through that, you are reducing the lumen through which air can come in, so it will need more muscle activation. You breathe in through that, and then again you breathe out through that. That will also be beneficial. But as I told you, these are highly skilled maneuvers to be done under care, simply because if we tend to overdo it, what will happen is it will fatigue fast, it will increase the respiratory challenge. Okay? And normally when we prescribe respiratory exercises, we do not allow people to do deep breathing exercises more than 2 minutes at a stretch, because you will hyperventilate, you will start feeling giddy. That's what will happen. Okay? So though the philosophy is this, I highlighted the importance of ensuring that they do not overdo it. If they overdo it, they will actually increase the respiratory rate, they will fatigue, and then it will probably alter the breathing pattern more. So they have to be very slow to begin. So if you are advising people, ask them to respect the body. If they're feeling overtly fatigued, if they're feeling overtly tired, that means what we are tending to do is probably at a higher intensity. The intensity has been reduced. That's the golden philosophy to follow. Be it breathing exercise, being it walking, be it strength training. The golden philosophy.
Thank you, sir.
And the exercise should be at a mild, begin with a light intensity, and then slowly progress to a moderate intensity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your wonderful session, and we are happy to have you with us. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Any more questions? Any more clarification?
There's no more questions, sir. Like,
what I can do, we had created an exercise booklet, okay, what we've been giving to people who's COVID. I can share that with you in case you can want to use that as a simple starting point to educate nurses. You want to share that with your participants. We as a department had created that. I can share it with Ramya, or then you can put it across to your audience. You can share it. I'm sure you'll have their email IDs. You're free to share it with them. That will guide through that. But when you suggest people to exercise, please remember the precautions that needs to be followed. That's very important to remember. Okay.
yes, sir. Sure. Please share with us, sir. Those.
I'll share it with you. I'll share it as a mail to you. you can forward them to others. We'd in fact done a series of videos for seniors, for people with post-COVID. So I can definitely share the exercise booklet what we created. It's a very generic, simple, basic exercise that can be done safely. You'll be happy to share that. Sure.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much.
With this, we come to the end of today's webinar. Today, I take the opportunity to put all my gratitude in words. At the outset, I thank our resource persons for making their presentation excellent, interesting, and meaningful. I thank all the participants for attending this webinar. I thank our resource persons for making this presentation excellent, interesting, meaningful. Dr. Akshay Rao, Dr. Vidya, Dr. Sonali Jadhav ma'am, Ms. Harshita, and Dr. Sundar. I also thank our principal ma'am for wholeheartedly. I must thank our principal ma'am for her enthusiastic support, guidance, and her words of encouragement. I thank Balamurugan sir for supporting us technically throughout this webinar. And I'm fortunate to thank our teachers and my dear colleagues, Lata ma'am, Sangeeta ma'am, Rajashri ma'am, and Susha ma'am. Also, I thank Ms. Varalakshmi ma'am for helping us to make a beautiful invitation and PowerPoints. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, one and all. We'll meet you in the next webinar that we are planning for. Happy weekend. Thank you, everyone.